Hi, this is These Unprecedented Times, and I'm Claire Hogan with the Studio for Teaching and Learning Innovation at William & Mary. Over the last 6 months, there has been a nationwide resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement in response to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and other unarmed Black Americans. We've seen calls for police reform, massive fundraising efforts, protests, and more. At William & Mary, the Black Lives Matter movement has taken root with weekly protests. For 26 consecutive weeks, students have gathered around Colonial Williamsburg for a peaceful demonstration. Today, we speak to the head organizer of these protests, Felecia Hayes.
My name is Felecia Hayes. I am one of the organizers, kind of the head organizer for the weekly protests in Merchant Square every week with protests in and around the William & Mary community. I'm a student athlete at the college. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about the protests. So when did those start and how did you end up organizing them?
These protests began when George Floyd was murdered a couple days after he was. After George Floyd, that took place, and it was within the news, and it was something that was very, you could see it everywhere. I mean, on TV and on Twitter, like everywhere. I personally, as a Black woman, felt that it was very traumatic to see all of that. So I became extremely upset about it. So one day I just woke up and I said I need to vocalize my feelings, and I need to, try to make some sort of a difference. I don't know how to start it, but I need to do something. So I went to CVS, I got markers and poster board, and I just sat in my room and I just started writing posters. And when it came time, I let my housemates know that, hey, I'm on my way to Confusion Corner, where Richmond Road and Jamestown Road meets. And I decided that we were going to stand out there and, make our voices heard and chant, just vocalize those feelings that I was talking about. Had a professor walk up with his family. So it was just basically the 5 or 6 of us out there just standing alone. That's how it all started. I mean, May 30th, and now we're on our, I think, 22nd consecutive protest. So yeah, it's been going around roughly 5 months, I think. So yeah.
So had you been involved in social justice or advocacy before? What sort of made you the pioneer of these protests at Confusion Corner?
Like I said, it all just had started with me just getting upset. I mean, I would consider myself a very vocal person and an advocate for speaking out for people who are just marginalized communities and people who need someone to speak out for them. Big proponent for helping others, and also vocalizing that. It's just something that's always been in how I've been raised. And that's how I decided to do that.
So from that first protest, now you've had, 22, you said. How have you seen those evolve? You said the first one had 5 people there, but now I know you have a ton of people coming to a lot of the protests. What has that been like? How have those been evolving?
So with numbers, they've been evolving. They kind of go up and down. As we've been protesting. I know that it started with 5. From then, I think within a month, there was at least 50, 75 people there. Wow. And then it went down again. And then it went back up to maybe 150, and then it went to pushing 200, even when Breonna Taylor's like I said, the numbers definitely raised tremendously after the decision was made, after Breonna Taylor's case, and not sentencing the men that were responsible for her death.
Right.
So I've seen a pattern of students wanting to be involved when it's in the news, and then not necessarily wanting to be involved when it isn't. So it's one of the things that I and the people that are out there chanting and organizing with me try to emphasize, that in order to be anti-racist, it's something that it's a decision. It's a self-decision that you make every day. It's not something you do just because everyone else is doing it. You know, you're making the decision to try to make another Black person's life better by solely your actions. It's making the decision to see the norm and saying, I'm not going to stand for that any longer in order to make a change. And now that's just like not as large scale, but that's what it takes in order to, you know, make that larger difference.
Have you seen student attitudes on campus change in regards to like racial justice, equity, things like that, because of all the protests, the Black Lives Matter movement, things that have been happening this summer?
So it's kind of been a little difficult to gauge where exactly some people stand in all of this. When that comes with just students, that comes with administration, that comes with anyone in this time, people in power. Just because it's a hashtag and it's very popular doesn't necessarily mean that people believe it. So I've seen changes seen like through social media, because we're not really that much in person. But I've seen a lot of advocacy, like with groups on campus, mainly groups dedicated to people of color, wanting to like speak out and like see changes made in different areas. But then I also see people, predominantly white, like groups on campus, I would say maybe like sorority life or fraternity life or just different other organizations. And some I know are very genuine, but some like I just need, like it's important that we continue to push this, because if it isn't pushed, will they still make these actions?
So as somebody who's there like every week in these protests, organizing these protests, do you see a lot of that from maybe student orgs as like performative? Do you see that as genuine? Like how are your reactions to anything like that?
I challenge I challenge everyone out there not to be performative. Like going back to that last question, that's the fear in everything. It's always staying clear of performative actions and just looking past everything and, you know, looking for those actual, you know, actions to take towards dismantling racism in every space that there are. So I've definitely seen individuals coming out there that are extremely passionate and want to do whatever they can in their lives and in their communities to see that change happen. But as invested as I am, I just can't afford to just trust that they're going to, you know, they're there because they actually want to be there. Or sometimes I get like kind of frustrated because I'm out there protesting and I don't hear everyone, you know, chanting. And sometimes I feel like, you know, sometimes there are people who are out there because they feel like they are supposed to be out there, but not necessarily because they want to. So that's just something that I constantly like reiterate over and over again, that it is a decision within the individual to stand up for what's right, though you know you're supposed to.
So as you've been out there protesting like every week, have you had any backlash from the William and Mary community, from the Williamsburg community? What has the reaction been?
Backlash can be seen as many different things. Often head nods, thumbs down, middle fingers. Our protests weren't always as stationary as they are now. That's because of the 10-person, you know, COVID rule that William and Mary Healthy Together created. But we used to start at Confusion Corner, stay there for roughly 30 minutes, go to Cheese Shop, like right in front of the Cheese Shop area, and like spread out within, like in between tables and in front of Cheese Shop, kind of lecture to them for maybe 30 minutes and then march to the Capitol and back, and we would be done. It was like 2 hours long. That was when we had the most backlash. And that they were coming from people, just ordinary people passing by that would say things like, Black lives don't matter, all lives matter, just basically discrediting our movement and what we're, speaking on. We even had one incident when we were marching, and from the Capitol, we had just left the Capitol because we usually would like debrief there. We were marching back to end, and there were a group of people that decided that they wanted to follow us as we were marching back, and they were just chanting in opposition to what we were, speaking on.
Oh, wow.
So, a lot of what they were saying is saying that we were like anti-American. They even like kind of stopped, and we stopped with them just to like, hear what they were saying. But it turned into like kind of a standoffish type thing. So we're like yelling back and forth at each other, and we're basically lined up in the middle of Dog Street. And they're yelling at us unmasked, like just like, spit coming out of their mouths. Not like directly spitting on us, but like it's like very unsanitary with them having masks on and during a pandemic. So they were, that's just one incident of many incidents. Like I've had people laugh at us, just like openly laugh. I mean, that's like nothing, but like the many things that have occurred regarding backlash is like very minuscule compared to like the many things that have happened to people in the past that decide to speak out. So, I mean, we hold our composure and we do what we need to do.
So sort of in the face of like those kind of dangerous situations from, the vitriol from the Williamsburg community, but you're still doing it every week, like what helps you persevere? Like what keeps you going in this?
I used to say at 10 a.m. every protest, I would get ready and like get all my stuff together, and I would sit and even like ask myself, I would question myself, why am I doing this? Like, why are we still doing this? Yeah. And anyway, I would just like, get up and go out anyway. And it's the random comments and the random words that are like sent our way to help encourage us. I had a young lady on campus call me and thank me for a particular sign that she drove past that resonated with her. And that meant something, because she said that, sometimes in the William & Mary community, it doesn't necessarily feel as welcoming to be within the community that she was in and see a sign like that. So it's small comments like that like continue to like drive us, because what we're doing is not large scale at all. It kind of is, like, compared to like just making the individual decision like to just be anti-racist, but like, yeah, we're making our voices heard within the administration and the William & Mary community, but we're changing someone else's life and we're making someone feel welcome. And I mean, from that is just, it's big. That means something. So there's like, if you're going to help somebody, then might as well just like, keep it going.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, you're sort of talking about the little, like the small scale interactions that you've been having, but I know you also mentioned that you've had an impact on the William & Mary administration. I think you've had a meeting with Katherine Rowe. Is that correct? Tell me about that.
Yeah. Over the summer, a lot of petitions were being put out, just circling around the William & Mary community. And next thing you know, like, I'm in a group with maybe 5 or 6 individuals, and we're like in a working group to say, what do we need to do on campus to ensure that like Black Lives Matter.
Right.
So we came up with a list of changes that we felt that needed to happen, like, like educating the William & Mary students of William & Mary's past, like law enforcement, statues and building names. And that definitely was an experience to go through with, speaking of like developing like that very list, like knowing we're passionate about it, putting in the time and effort and pushing towards towards administration, and speaking on that. After that meeting with Katherine Rowe and the other people in the working group, I realized that the most you can do with creating change is working from within and not necessarily going directly to the head. We worked with going to the head initially, and then we realized that when we didn't necessarily see the initial change that we wanted to, we realized that we needed to work within. And I think I've learned that through all of this is working within and working with like your small core people and growing, like if that kind of like along the lines of grassroots. So like working with that and then growing. So we took a step back after like presenting to Katherine Rowe the things that need to change. And as an athlete, I just took a step back and said, what is this platform? Like, how can I use this? I don't have any position of leadership in William & Mary athletics, but I have a voice and I can I can speak up during these times in this space. So I looked at William & Mary athletics and I looked at all the issues that have taken place in the past with Black student athletes, and I assessed the things that needed to change. So I wrote up a letter to the athletic director and every head coach and all of William & Mary athletics, their administration. And I had a couple people who actually have, I would say, leadership positions within athletics as student athletes. I had them sign on, like SAC representatives, team captains, also friends of mine. I had them sign on with me, to kind of like, push my message.
Yeah.
So we looked and we said, we don't have study hall anymore. We don't have academy anymore. We don't have a mentorship program for these like Black athletes that are coming in here that don't necessarily know how to like survive William & Mary.
Right.
Mental health counselor. There's been many, we don't have a particular mental health counselor like specified for William & Mary athletics. And the last item, I think there's 4 items. Yeah. The last item was we need more academic advisors. For all the student athletes that we have, we had like 2 and now we have 1. So it's like really interesting when you hear about other schools and the amount of like academic support that they have, and like here, like things just like gradually trickled off. Yeah, and within that letter, something that I always say and I always reiterate over and over again is when we lack resources, Black lives suffer. So just wanted to like, let that drive me within athletics. And yeah.
So how was that letter received by athletics? Have you seen any of the changes that you proposed to be implemented?
I've seen some changes, but I definitely just don't want to ever get complacent into wherever we are, because we can always be better. And to say the least, this school has a tremendous amount. This school has a lot of fixing to do,
right? Whether
it's with transparency or just supporting people of color in any space and Black students. We have many, many years in doing that. So I never get complacent in whatever happens, like any type of system been put in place from that. Study hall, we're not really in person. You can't really like come back unless they can find a way to do that. Academy was brought back from the letter. Mentorship programs have been developed. I know that they're working with alumni right now to develop one. There is a ongoing student athlete mentorship program that has been developed, like kind of like working with older student athletes and freshmen and transfers, just so they know what the ropes are and just like can know how to network once they leave. Mental health wise, we do not have a mental health counselor, but they seem to be providing resources more to athletics, or just reiterating some that haven't really been pushed. But a mental health counselor is 100% needed and necessary. with the academic advisor bullet point, I think that there's been a lot of hiring, like freezing. So they, I guess they just, with like COVID and everything. So I don't know if they're necessarily doing that right now. But yeah, shout out to Lene. She's holding it down. That one individual, all those athletes right now. But yeah, that didn't really change. But I just think academy and the mentorship program is like taking off. But we do need mental health help.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about moving away from the sort of like high level administrative response and more to like a grassroots movement. But I also know that like as the Black Lives Matter protests were happening across the country this summer, William & Mary kind of sent us like maybe a couple of emails about it. And I know a lot of students felt like that wasn't adequate. That wasn't enough. That wasn't a good enough response from administration.
Yeah. William & Mary has to, I reiterate this in many meetings I'm in with administrators, faculty, students. William & Mary has to learn how to let go. And I think that it's stopping them from being more transparent and making real change for these Black students. We compromise too much with alumni. We compromise too much with donors in order. I mean, I understand this school is a business, but I mean, we're here to learn and we're here to be in this community. So creating this space so that we feel welcome is extremely important. And yeah, I agree with the many students that didn't feel like those statements were adequate enough. Like it's important that we stand on what we say, and we're very explicit in saying that we don't condone racism in any of its forms, whether it be blatant, which I think that they decided to take the stance on of we don't accept blatant racism here, like going around, saying like racial slurs and outwardly being difficult with people of color and making it their experience here bad. Like, of course, like, no, I mean, a majority of individuals, I would say, wouldn't go around doing that on this campus. But it's the systems and what's embedded in those systems that they won't let go of. So, I mean, they have a large amount of change that needs to be done, but yeah.
So if you were like in charge of William & Mary, if you were, instead of Katherine Rowe, if you were running the school, like what would be the big, large scale, like systematic changes that you would like to see implemented to support Black students?
I think one of the first ways I would stop is I would stop using Black students and people of color on this campus as tokens. I would stop using them as and asking them about their traumas time and time again as Black students in order to say, that's it. Like, we've done what we needed to do in order to make sure that this campus is inclusive. Holding kumbaya sessions of like, let's talk about our feelings with the Black kids in order to check off the diversity and inclusion check mark. And, I mean, I say this time and time again, that you make it so we start having a lot more like Black students on this campus through time. But what happens when we get here? Like, why are we going through the things that we're going through in the first place? Like, what needs to be changed at that level in order so that this campus really is inclusive? And another thing that I've been, I speak to that one professor that always, that was out there that very first time I protest. I'm still in contact with him. But one of the main topics that we've been talking about that needs to change with William & Mary, that I think across the board, is we need to stop looking at diversity and inclusion as an add-on. It's imperative, because it should be the standard. As high as we hold honor here, we created the honor, the honor code and, everything of that nature. We're very prestigious. We're in holding how this campus, just who this campus is. We hold it up to a high standard in saying that it's national importance in history. But we don't care as much about diversity and inclusion And we don't care about our Black students like we care about the honor code. Like, and at the end of the day, these are students that come here that are being mistreated day in and day out. Like, it shouldn't have taken George Floyd being murdered and Breonna Taylor to be murdered and the Black Lives Matter movement. Like, the movement itself, it should not have taken that to question, why am I walking past a statue of Thomas Jefferson every day? Why am I walking past almost every building, if not every building in the Sunken Gardens or on campus, almost every building on campus that's named after a racist or a slave, like a slave-owning male? Like, that's one of the things that swings it back to performative actions. Like, why was this never, discussed? Building names being changed. So these statues being removed. So, but they're still standing and the buildings are still up and it's priorities, So we'll see what actually happens.
Yeah. So do you think because of all the social change that's going on and has been going on since the summer, since the murder of George Floyd, do you think the people on campus are listening to Black voices more than they were before? Or are they just sort of, doing these performative things and then not listening anymore?
Well, I'm just going to be frank, some groups and individuals on campus haven't even don't converse with Black people on the day-to-day basis. They haven't made their friend groups inclusive. They've chosen not to educate themselves their entire lives. So some of it may be feelings of, I should be doing this. How do I get involved? I think it's been very apparent through all this white guilt. There's been a listening ear, but it's like I said, like it takes like the individual wanting to change and wanting to hear and, like creating that change within themselves and their surrounding areas. Like, it's interesting that we're having these like conversations on college campuses with people of our age, but like I say all the time, go home, talk to your racist parents. Like right. You need to have these conversations. Like, are you questioning your friends and your friend groups when they say something? Are you having these conversations with your friend groups? Are you having these dialogues with your friend groups? Are you, reading these books with your friends? Like that, Yeah.
And so how do you sort of see, I feel like William & Mary has a very complicated legacy with this, right? Because like you said, we have statues of people who were enslavers. We have buildings named after those same people. Half the college was built by enslaved people. Do you see William & Mary as having like a unique place in the national dialogue on anti-racism and racial equity?
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I've constantly said. If we are the front runners of this country, we're a public ivy, we are in the, I don't know if it's top 10, top 20, public universities in the country. Why aren't we making big statements? Why aren't we afraid to be bold? We're always told to like be for the bold. Like, why aren't we being bold as we want to? It's because we don't know how to let go. We don't know how to let go of our and that's just like racist traditions, and sometimes our alumni don't know how to let go of their racist beliefs and traditions also. So it's about letting go, I know the Lemon Project for years has been trying to memorialize the enslaved here at this campus, the once enslaved here at this campus. And it's really interesting that before these last 5 or 6 months, the Lemon Project has been working, but it was no one questioned how we would be memorializing enslaved people,
right? But
having statues and building names of people who enslaved them right next to them. No, that was never a question. So I just really think that is, inappropriate for one, highly disrespectful for Black students. But, like where's the balance, you know? I mean, there's like some sort of like balance that they feel like they need to like keep, and there's letting go again.
Yeah, definitely. So just sort of getting back to you personally, as you're sort of in the center of this like campus discourse on anti-racism, on race, how has that affected you personally? I know you said like sort of before the interview that you've had to say no to a lot of things to sort of like promote your own self-care and like mental health.
Yeah.
How has that affected you?
I mean, I definitely like it's taking a lot of being like selfish with my time, but at the same time, like you can't be selfish, like, because this isn't about me. It's about the larger scale, like, or just like I said before with just like impact. So I think about myself when I feel like I need to, but like, and also like a lot of times I don't I battle with who I should be speaking to. Like, I'm glad I could get on this call today, but like I just never want to be like held up that much, because all I did was just, you know, speak up on how I felt inside, and it can be done with anyone. So I just like being turned into some like individual, like specifically for anti-racism is like, I mean, I appreciate like the recognition of what like I've been doing, but I just cannot like reiterate how much like you just can't like fall back on that. Like you just got to keep going. So
yeah. And I know you talked a little bit about that one professor who came to the first protest on Dog Street and has sort of been like supporting you throughout this whole process. If there are any like professors listening who might have Black students who are or students who are very involved with these issues, like how could those professors best support those students?
I think support comes from many different ways and avenues. It comes from like caring for their students, like asking them if they're okay in these times, acknowledging that they're happening, acknowledging that the place that they stand in these times, and being very, specific and speaking on them, listening, a lot of listening, educating themselves in order to be equipped with the tasks that they have. Educators play a large role in just the fight against racism. I myself want to be an educator. So like when I say be equipped, there's been many essays written. I know James Baldwin is one of them. He wrote an essay on the importance of like education and like teaching and just being the one, educating your students and the role that you play in doing that. But it just takes a lot of self-education yourself and listening and being that support system, But like support comes from many, many different ways and avenues and different situations that like my mind's racing just like thinking about ways. But yeah, that's how I can condense it the best way I can.
Yeah. So you slipped in there that you wanted to be an educator yourself. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I've always like loved kids. Like I've always just like been a proponent for child education. Growing up, I wasn't necessarily I don't know. I feel like I didn't have the best education experience having with teachers and even like creating like these safe spaces in classrooms. Like I felt like I was often like felt as if I was an outsider within my classrooms, like bullied and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So teaching was never a question when I came to college. Like I was just like, into like the STEM field because it's just something that like, your parents push on you for years. And then next thing you know, you're like, oh, I don't like this. Yeah. So I'm starting taking classes. I'm like, yeah, this is not for me. So I'm like working through kinesiology, just like kind of found my way through that major in public health. And I'm like, okay, I like this, but I still want to work with kids. So how do I do that? Got into an internship with the Student Health Initiative program, basically implementing, getting active in the classroom and like changing lessons to fit like public health. Not necessarily like when I tell people that I want to be an educator and I have a public health degree, they're like, oh, do you want to be a PE teacher? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. Nothing wrong with PE teachers, like absolutely nothing wrong with physical education teachers, but that's just not what I want to do. Like there's so many different avenues that you could go with that.
Right.
So I looked at the Student Health Initiative program, SHIP program, and I was like, this is something I want to do. So I started thinking about how I could be implement these in the classrooms. I was like, why don't I just become an elementary school teacher? So from then on, my junior year, first semester, I constantly was trying to get into the classroom, like trying to get experience with educators time and time again. So here I am, about to apply to the School of Ed here.
Oh.
And let's hope I get in. Yeah, so that's how I ended up where I wanted to do.
That's so cool. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Awesome. So if somebody wanted to perhaps join one of the protests, where could they find them?
Like I said, from the beginning, we've been kind of working within, but from there, there has been loads of individuals outside that just repost and repost and repost. So I guess you can follow me on Twitter, QueenFadrian, Queen Fadrian. That's my middle name, Adrian. I guess on my Instagram _FeHayes, FeHayes. That's basically the route we go with getting our message out. I post every week and people look at that, and then my friends post, and we go through just the retweets and likes, and next thing you know, it's 200 people out there. So yeah.
Awesome. And so can you just say the time and place of the protest, just in case somebody wants to join?
The protests are every week at noon at the intersection of Jamestown Road and Richmond Road. Call it Confusion Corner, as most know. We're there every noon. You meet there, get a sign, and stand on an X. So, yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming into the studio with us today.
No problem. It's glad to be with all of you today.
With the end of the semester upon us, the Black Lives Matter protests have concluded for 2020, but there's always more to do. Research racism, donate to individuals in need, talk to your friends and family about inequality. For information about future protests, check out Felecia Hayes on Instagram at @FeHayes. That's _FeHayes. Thank you so much to Felicia for coming on the podcast today. And if you like what you heard, remember to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SoundCloud.